If only I'd realized before it was too late.
Don't blame yourself, Jemma. This isn't your fault. Yeah, you still have the rest of your life to live. Caesar wouldn't want to see you spending it feeling guilty.
Exciting stuff, isn't it?
Yes, it's just... It reminds me of him.
No wonder. Caesar was a famous magician too. So, how did you two first meet, Jemma?
Well, I was out on the street once, and I saw him performing for little children. Children love magic, because they're willing to believe in things that can't be rationally explained. Caesar had this amazing way of bringing them into a dreamlike world. And somehow, I felt drawn to him too. So I went up and asked him to do a trick for me.
Aw, that sounds so romantic. What trick did he do?
It was with a flower. He took it in his hand, snapped his fingers, and it magically appeared on my head. I was so happy that day. No one had ever given me a flower before that.
Oh, that's so cute! Actually, now that you mention it, Lenny's done that one before.
Is that right? Then I suppose he's a romantic at heart, just like Caesar. So let's treasure the time we have with him. After all, you never know when the people dearest to you might be gone. How disappointing. So you'd sooner trust Lorenzo than me, even without a shred of evidence?
A magician is an expert at playing the audience to get the result they want. And I have no doubt that you, Jemma, are equally talented in this regard. With a little help from Lorenzo, you put on a very convincing performance. The lovesick fiancé, whose devotion to her betrothed is unshakable, even under threats of violence. Caesar was maligned and hated by all for 10 years, but you? Everyone sympathized with your plight. Who would suspect for 1 second that the lovely young lady always seen weeping in front of Caesar's grave was actually the mastermind behind his demise? No, not that poor lady. Perish the thought.
Well, Linny, if you're so confident in your version of events, then I think the answer should be obvious. Having killed Caesar with his own hands, Lorenzo was plagued by overwhelming guilt. Revealing the Phantom Weasel's true identity would serve no purpose. But if the Weasel remained free, then she could take care of Lorenzo's loved ones.
An excellent answer, though sadly a little dull.
Is that right? Well, don't let me bore you. If you'd care to change the topic to something more interesting, I'd be much obliged.
As a matter of fact, there's one thing I'd really like to understand. Why would the real Weasel have targeted things that only have value to other people? Could you shed any light on that?
Of course. After all, we're just telling stories here, aren't we? If I had to guess, I would say that the real Weasel must have had a terrible childhood. Left to fend for herself after her parents died young. Betrayed, scorned, beaten. She'd scrounge waste paper from garbage bins to draw on, using twigs and dirt for lack of ink and pen. She'd sew ugly rag dolls from whatever scrap material she could get her hands on. This was her only source of happiness in life. But it was all she needed, and she was content. Until the world decided that even this was too good for her. Once again, she was betrayed. And this time, everything was taken from her. She felt like life was a miry pit that dragged her further down the more she struggled to escape. At that tender age, she should have been happy. Instead, she stood in the shadows and watched with envy as all good things in the world passed her by. This was a fate too cruel for anyone to bear. Her pain became a breeding ground for dark thoughts. Thoughts which festered and grew into a twisted solution to her troubles. I detest the happiness of others, in all its forms alike. I will rob them of everything they hold to be good and true, and it will fill the void in my soul.
That's some pretty heavy stuff.
Now it all makes sense.
Does this story satisfy you, Linny?